Hello and welcome to the conversation right here on TYT. And do I have the guest for you today? I have none other than President Sara Nelson herself. We know that she is leading the airline workers, all of them, even the pilots won't in on the action. But I know it's important, Madam President. I want to read a little bit of your formal bio, just in case there may be anybody viewing who do not know of you, which I know is rare. But Sara Nelson has served as the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, AFL-CIO, since 2014. And she is currently serving her third 4-year term. She first became a union member in 1996 when she was hired as a flight attendant at United Airlines. And today she represents over 50,000 aviation first responders at 19 airlines. Madam President, your bio goes on and on. You are a fighter, an activist. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And we are very, and I mean very honored to have you here on TYT's The Conversation. You are the person to talk to about what is happening in all of labor. And you were just with the actors and the writers, which I know everybody should. Let me not make assumptions here. Just in case there may be a few people who do not know that there's a lot of striking going on and a lot of worker solidarity. But you were just on the line with the writers and the actors and actresses out there in that industry. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with them.
Well, for sure, Senator Turner, my sister Nina. There is nobody who I'd rather be in conversation with than somebody like you. So that's all for you. But yeah, let me tell you about it. It was actually really extraordinary. The last time the Writers Guild was on strike was in 2007. That also was about their pay structure and making sure that they were getting a fair wage for all of their creativity and what they contribute to Hollywood. This time, it's the first time in 60 years, I believe, that we've had more than one Hollywood union out on strike together at the same time. So I was out there on the picket line with both SAG and WGA, and I gotta say, there were unions from all over the valley showing up. UFCW was out there strong. We had a whole bunch of flight attendants out there picketing. IATSE was out there. Teamsters were out there. It is definitely the summer of solidarity. And this strike with the writers, I think we're just about to hit 100 days for the writers. It's been a couple weeks for the actors, but they are fighting for the construct of their pay structure that will fit today's media market, that will fit today's entertainment market. And that is fundamentally what we're fighting in every single industry. I mean, let's face it, we are creating billions and billions of dollars for the corporate elite. They are siphoning that off through stock buybacks and any other tool that they can to put it in their pockets and get it into Wall Street's hands rather than into the hands of the people who are creating all the content, who are building all the things that matter, who are engineering those things and being creative and innovators. And so the strike that's happening all over the country, really, because these shows are produced all over the country, but mainly in New York and LA. These picket lines are happening every single day. And I'll tell you what, the studio CEOs spoke up and said that they weren't gonna get to the picket line, or they weren't gonna get to the negotiating table until the fall, when people have lost their homes and they're hungry and they're worn out and they're ready to settle. They're ready to settle for something less. And what they don't understand is that the commitment of the working class right now is so solid. It is solidarity out there everywhere, because everyone understands that if you are a person who works, you are getting squeezed. And if you are an owner, if you are in the corporate class, you are getting richer and richer. And people are getting, billions of dollars upon billions of dollars. They don't need this. This is not what they need. It's just to go in the rankings of who's the richest person in the world. while the rest of America is suffering and more people are falling into poverty. So this strike line was extraordinary. They're out there fighting for all of us. But what I will also tell you is many of them said that the atmosphere around them is so different than 2007. They had to strike in 2007. They had to strike for what was fair for themselves, and they were put in that position. But they said the public didn't really get it, and they were telling them to get back to work. And there were people who were angry against the strikers. And I have to tell you, we could barely hear our own selves chanting because there were so many beep beeps, honk honks from all the cars that were passing. People shouting love and solidarity and keep going. You're fighting for all of us. I mean, the spirit was just incredible, not just on the picket line, but right in the community.
Yeah, and what a difference a few years makes. I think most people either know someone or they themselves are in a situation where they are not getting exactly what they deserve. And workers from whatever industry, Madam President, they're not asking for more than what they deserve. They're asking for fair wages, for living wages, and it makes no sense. This is a period of gluttony. I think Dr. Robert Reich, and I think Dr. Robert Reich calls this the second wave of the Gilded Age, and he is so right in that, where there was a period of time in this country where this exact thing was happening, where the gluttony and the greed, and it's not about wealth. Nobody begrudges anybody for having wealth, but we're talking about ultra wealthy people who do not care. And as you quoted, the CEOs, some of those CEOs saying they want to wait out the folks who are on strike, and whether it's the writers and the actors or another industry, this is how these people think. It's never enough for them. And at a certain point, when you're making your wealth at somebody else's demise, you need to find another way to make the wealth. And the fact that they don't want to share in the bounty is immoral, it is cruel, and we should not stand for it in 2023. So I am so glad that you all could not hear yourselves over the support that was being lavished on you. So, Madam President, but before we came on air today, you had mentioned that there's a lot of tweeting and social media, beautiful people, social, do your thing, and lift up our workers who are out there on the front lines for each and every one of us. That there's a slogan going around called hot labor summer. Sounds cool and chic and all of that and hip. But you were telling me a little bit about how our sisters and brothers, family and friends in the farm industry feel about that slogan. Can you share that with our viewers?
Yeah, so I mean, hot labor summer is intended to say that this is cool, that this is sexy, that you're being a part of something, something really fun and engaging and exciting. And it would be fine if the hot were not combined with labor. Because putting this in terms with what the farm workers have to deal with every single day, climbing up and down ladders all day long, picking fruit, sometimes not getting water breaks and rest breaks, and in 101-degree temperature so that we can eat, making a minimum wage. It's not so funny, and it's not so cute, and it's not so sexy to say hot labor when you think about it that way. So it's just important for us to think about that, and in solidarity and understanding that. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to explain that to your viewers. They suggest that we talk about the summer of solidarity or solidarity summer, or if it's hot, and everybody likes to be hot. I do too. We turn our AFA pins red and we talk about a hot summer of picketing. But that's the form that we should be talking about, and just take care that when we're talking about hot labor, that's not such a funny thing. And we actually have people who are dying out there doing this work, and so we just want to, in solidarity with them, not put those two words together.
Okay, so they prefer that we use summer of solidarity or solidarity summer instead of hot. And you also mentioned how some of the CEOs, the fat cats of these corporations, have been just bemoaning the fact that they're going to turn up the heat, so to speak, that this generation of workers are too coddled. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to paraphrase this. I tweeted about this last week. I don't know if anybody saw, but the cotton industry, the cotton lobby was complaining about, workers becoming too soft and getting rid of the air conditioning, and explaining that it really wasn't fair to the workers to have air conditioning because the vast difference between an air conditioned break room and being out in the fields picking the cotton was so great that there was gonna be too much a strain on their bodies going from that cooler place to the hotter place. And then in the process also called this next generation, not used to being able to work hard because they've been living a sedentary lifestyle. So this is the attack on workers that we're seeing. And the bosses are saying stuff out loud that we in some cases haven't heard for 100 years. And they're fighting for things like lifting child labor laws so that children can be sent into work. Really before they're done with their education or have a chance to even find themselves, know who they are. And this is their solution. They instead of paying the going rate for labor today, instead of giving workers respect and recognizing the value that workers bring with experience, what they want to do is continue to drive to the lowest common denominator. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more popular in this country right now than unions. And so we're gonna start to hear it. We're gonna start to hear union out of a lot of politicians' mouths. But let's make sure that we're also checking to see what kind of policies they're supporting when they say union, right? We're not gonna allow them to use union as a way to push xenophobic, fearful policies, to push workers into competition with other people, to make workers believe that immigrants are in competition with them for their labor. We have to lift everybody up in solidarity. And these words of the bosses they're saying out loud, like I said, what they haven't been willing to say for 100 years because they've gotten lazy. We haven't been pushing them. They haven't had to come to the table with collective bargaining, and they've taken more and more. And the way that they're taking today is not just not paying people a fair wage or denying them health care or a pension. Now they're cutting costs by cutting corners on safety. And that's the biggest reason with that popularity of unions, that's the biggest reason that workers are coming to unions today. Number one is an unsafe work condition in their workplace. Think about that. That is what we're fighting for in 2023. Safe conditions on the job, the ability to be able to go home to your family at night after putting in a day's work and actually be with your family and control your time. So we're back to fighting the things that we were fighting 100 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's particularly galling that anybody in the cotton industry would use comfort and picking cotton in the same breath. But here we are. I mean, I'm just absolutely livid about it, and thinking about also what people like DeSantis is doing in Florida, trying to rewrite history and saying that enslaved Black people gained so many skills from being chattel slaves is really galling. And we are indeed going backwards in this country, particularly at the hands of the GOP. Madam President, I do agree with you that we will have many politicians across the spectrum talking about labor, but are they about labor?
That's right.
Policies, are they willing to put something on the line? Will they not stand in the way of labor unions? A shout out to our rail workers who early on last year had the entire Congress, well, not the entire Congress, there were some who did not support that, but the overwhelming majority of the Congress turned into cowards when it came to standing up to the robber barons. Instead, they put the burden on the rail workers, and we cannot have that again, taking away their ability to strike. So the Teamsters come to mind.
I was gonna say, yes.
And they were able, I mean, e-commerce is ever growing. It was growing before the COVID-19 pandemic. It exploded at the height of COVID-19. And thank God that we did have that as a vehicle to get people the things that they needed, like food and medicine and supplies. And the Teamsters at the UPS were able to use that all to their advantage. They told the bosses, F around and find out if you want to, but we ready to go on strike. Now it was averted. So let's talk a little bit about that and how encouraging what happened for the Teamsters at UPS is for other workers who are standing in that gap right now.
Well, first of all, I mean, what the Teamsters did was they elected new leadership. And this is leadership who ran on this issue a year and a half, 2 years ago. So there's been prep. The whole reason that Sean O'Brien ran for office was to get to these negotiations because he knew that this is the biggest single unit contract negotiations in the private industry. And he knew that this was going to set the tone, not only for resetting the way that labor is going, not going backwards, taking concessions, but also showing other workers all around the country what can be done if you have a union. One of the things that UPS tried to use against them in this contract campaign was talking about the pay and benefits that the UPS workers get. Not the part-timers, they didn't want to talk about the part-timers, but the full-time UPS workers who were working under that union contract, yeah, they already had good pay. They already had, good health care, good pension. Was it enough? Is it enough of sharing in the profits? No, but the reason that they had it was because there was a union there in the first place. And so what Sean did was he talked about that. But he also said, we're gonna strike. We're gonna strike. And he let that out right at the very beginning. When in collective bargaining, you cannot have collective bargaining where the workers and management come to the table unless the playing field is even. And the only way to make it even is to have an issue where everybody's gonna lose something. The company's gonna lose production, right? And the workers are gonna lose their paycheck in a strike. Let's be real about this. It's pain for everybody, right? And the workers said, no, we know what we're willing to do. We know what we're fighting for. They were out there, Sean was out there defining what the issues were with the members right from the beginning. It was very clear. Everybody knew what they were going to the table to fight for. So that transparent discussion with the members all the way through, bringing more people, more local leaders to the bargaining table to have the most opening bargaining that we have seen at UPS in decades. In fact, maybe in a lot of places in decades. And then backing up what they were willing to do, but to meet those demands. So letting UPS know right from the beginning, we're gonna strike. We're gonna get ready to strike. And then they took that strike vote too, which backed up what Sean had already been saying the whole time. And he was very, very clear. He said, we're gonna make UPS the example of what the rest of corporate America has to meet. And so I have to tell you, I was a little concerned because when in history, when the government has been on the workers' side, the workers have generally won. And being on their side, now I'm not talking about putting the thumb on the scale by any means. I'm just saying like keeping things fair, right?
That's right.
And when the government has been against the workers have lost. So in this case, Sean's message to the White House was stay out. Like appreciate that you want these updates, appreciate you want to help, but the best way you can help is let us exercise our power. Let them really understand that they are choosing a strike. They are choosing to put economic harm on people all across this economy when those UPS operations go down. And it really put UPS on the defensive. And once that was really clear that the White House understood that, then that deal came together fast. And I've seen it happen before. Things can change in an instant when the risk becomes too great to those who are in control. And they will change their minds, and that's exactly what UPS did. They got a phenomenal deal. They're voting on that now. I'm gonna let the members do that. I won't make a lot of comments about it. But we heard about a lot of the gains that they were making throughout the contract negotiations, which also sets up an opportunity for workers to really review what's there, see the realities of it, and be able to cast an informed vote and not also, let's talk a little bit about fake news. There are people who would love to see this not work out. The rest of the economy, the rest of Wall Street, the rest of CEOs around America would love to see this deal fall apart because this does set a new standard. This does set a new standard for working people, and it's the next step on the mountain that we have to climb. That's gonna make us a little bit stronger to be able to do that. So I'm super proud of the Teamsters rank and file. That I'll tell you what, that just practicing for a just contract, the UPS saw exactly what was coming at them. The whole country did. Those Teamsters got out there, showed them getting out on the line in all kinds of weather conditions, letting them know that they were strong. They were gonna back up that strike vote 100%. By withholding their labor and making UPS have to make the decision about, are we gonna pay people a fair wage? Are we gonna treat them all the same? Or are we gonna take on this strike and be the ones to take the fall for it because we knew what the decision was. So that was a textbook contract campaign. I would suggest every other union look at that, model that. That is the way to do it. And sometimes, they don't get it. I think UPS did not doubt for a second what the Teamsters were ready to do.
Oh, they had the resolve. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, the resolve was strong. And they had a strike fund too. I think the strike fund is and we've talked about strike funds and how important that they are to be able to supplement workers if in fact they do have to go on strike. But your point about how Sean and the Teamsters seized the message, in messaging we talk about the villain, the vindicator, and the victim. And they definitely made UPS the villain in this. They got out strong on that. As you laid out, hey, if there is a strike, it's on UPS's head. There are 340,000 of us. We deliver millions, multi-millions of packages every single day. And we're not just talking about a nice dress or a nice pair of pants or shoes. We're talking about the supplies and food and other things, that medicine that people need. So y'all go ahead if you want to. You want to play these games? We're gonna play some games with you. And they did that. I mean, just so inspiring. And what is happening across the country is inspiring too. I mean, Madam President, workers are standing up, and the more victories that are had, the more fuel it gives for other members of the House of Labor and those who are trying to form labor unions too. Because we know there are many, many workers who do not have the protection of labor or of labor unions, and they would like those protections as well. So,
and I'll tell you, I want to make one other point about this. So, there was not a strike, right? And assuming that this gets ratified, the strike is our tactic. Solidarity is our power. So, I saw that out on the picket line with SAG and WGA too. That IATSE and Teamsters are out there. The IATSE negotiations are coming up. The Teamsters negotiations are coming up, and they understand that if they stand in solidarity with WGA and SAG, they're teaching these studios a lesson. And when they get to the bargaining table, the studios are gonna remember this. So this strike matters to everyone in this industry. People who mop the floors in the studio, everyone, matters to everyone. And it sets a tone for the rest of the industry. So I'm not saying that we never have to strike. Sometimes you gotta show them. You gotta teach them. And these guys clearly don't get it because they think that they can wear people out. That is not gonna happen now. The solidarity is so strong, that is not gonna happen. But they're gonna learn the lesson, and then we're gonna tell them, we're gonna do the same thing to you with the IATSE and Teamsters. And I bet you, once this strike is settled, they're gonna settle that too without strikes. Just like happened with the just before COVID, the East Coast strike with the UFCW and the grocery workers, and then that set a standard for negotiations out in LA. And they settled without even going to that strike because they had just been taught again. We gotta teach these guys over and over again that we're ready to do it, that we're gonna back up what we say. And that credible strike threat should lead to deals. That should encourage people to get agreements done.
No, it absolutely should. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about strikes are a last resort. And we do want our viewers to know that nobody working is gearing up saying, oh my God, I wanna go on strike today. Workers don't want to go on strike because it's a sacrifice. They lose their wages, they lose their benefits. It puts a lot of uncertainty in their lives and the lives of their families and their community because they have to go on strike. So they not hopping for joy saying, let's go on strike today. It is the last resort. And when any labor union, when the House of Labor, when our neighbors and our family and our friends, when they tell you they got to go on strike, that's serious business. And we should stand in solidarity with them at all times because they're not asking for much. They're asking to be able to live a good life. And it is really, it's sinister, it's immoral to me that in this country, there's a mindset among the ultra wealthy that working class people, whether they're at the top of the working class, the middle of the working class, or the bottom of the working class, I believe that if you ain't got a sugar daddy, a sugar mama, or sugar somebody, you are in the working class. And it behooves all of us to be in solidarity with workers, because as workers progress, as they get better benefits, better wages, better work conditions, that helps every single worker, whether they're unionized or not. It makes a difference. So we need to be there with them. And especially, and speaking of being there with folks, Sara Nelson, tell us what is happening with with your labor union, what you're working on, and what do you need?
Thank you so much for asking. So we are 85% organized in the airline industry. If we had that kind of labor density in every single industry, we would not even be having this conversation right now. Like, we would be running the tables, workers would be setting the agenda every single time. But for flight attendants, most of our organizing happened with the legacy carriers in the 1940s and early 50s. And since that time, Delta Airlines has been extremely anti-union. Their pilots organized in the 1930s, but they managed to keep unions out, with the exception of pilots and a small group of controllers who organized around the same time. And they have managed to keep unions generally off the property at Delta. So we have a huge campaign for Delta flight attendants. The Delta flight attendants, I don't know that I've ever seen them so energized and ready to go, ready for their union. It is a big job under the Railway Labor Act. We have to collect more than 50% of physically signed cards by 27,000 flight attendants within a year's time in order to file for an election. And we don't even have contact information for 8,000 people. So anybody out there watching, if you know a Delta flight attendant, get in touch with them. Let them know they can go to deltaafa.org to get engaged in the campaign. Let them know this is the way, if they love their airline, this is the way to keep it their airline, because without it, you've got a CEO who responds to the board and responds to the shareholders and responds to the investors, not to the workers, not to the people who are on our planes. And so if you love what you have, then lock it in with your union. And get your union locked in. So Delta organizing is huge. And another great thing about that is we are in partnership with the machinists organizing the people on the ramp, and with the Teamsters organizing the mechanics. And I have to tell you, that's historic. There's never been 3 unions on the property who are going in arm in arm doing this, and we can share resources this way. It also makes it very difficult. The company has been union busting for so long, it's in their DNA, but usually they say, oh, we're not really against you having a union. You get to decide that. We just think this particular union is bad for you. So with the 3 of us in there, with the 3 unions in there supporting the Delta workers who want a union, the company doesn't know where to shoot. And so that is great, but it also lifts each other up. And the more people that you have in this fight together, the more power there is. The pilots are supporting us. They put up a big billboard in Atlanta. And yes. I have to say, you mentioned pilots right off the top. Boy, they took strike votes across the industry. They've taken 99% strike votes, and they've gotten agreements done. You talk about that credible strike threat. But on the picket line at United Airlines, the chairman of the pilots union at United pointing to his collar at the end of a pre-rally speech to everyone at the briefing. And he said, you see this collar? This is not a white collar, this is a blue collar.
Come on.
And I'm telling you, like that was enough food for me to eat for the next year. It was so good, so good. So working people really identifying with each other, no matter how the job has been defined before, as close to the boardroom, or a more professional job that deserves to make more, that was mostly occupied by men. Let's get real. And so it's changing. It's changing. People are starting to understand which side they're on and how they need to be in community with other workers in order to turn the tide here. And that's what we're gonna do. We've got that campaign at Delta, but we also have, after these pilot contracts, these companies think that they're not gonna have to pay the rest of the workers as much as they paid to the pilots. And sure, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but in comparison, it should go up at the same rate, right? It should be equal in the step forward that the workers are taking. And so we have a real fight on our hands for these flight attendant contracts across the industry. A big one right now is Alaska Airlines. We're down to those economics, and Alaska flight attendants have turned their union pin red to show that they are in this contract fight. They have a big system-wide day of picketing on August 15th. So if people want to come out on a picket line, come on out. You can find out about that at afaalaska.org or at afacwa.org, and we'd love to see you out there. Right after that, flight attendants are going to be out with the writers and members of SAG out in New York on the 17th. And then on the 31st, we've got a big system-wide day of action at United Airlines. On the 30th of August, a big system-wide day of action at American Airlines for the flight attendants. So we're in big contract fights with the airlines. We helped save these airlines. It was literally our plan that got the airlines through COVID.
Exactly
and
right.
they would not exist right now if it were not for us. Not to mention the fact that we continued to go to work and make it possible for the airline industry to continue to run. So it is time to pay up. It's been 20 years of concession since 9/11, and people like to talk about a bailout for the airlines. Let me tell you something. This was a workers' first package that we got during COVID. The bailout came after 9/11 when all the airlines went into bankruptcy and forced $81 billion of concessions on the workers. It was $54 billion for 16 months of pay and benefits for workers during COVID, $81 billion after 9/11, losing our pensions, losing pay, giving up more productivity to the company, paying more of the cost of healthcare. So we were the bailout last time. And this time we steadied the industry, and now it's time, now that they're back to making profits, now it's time to negotiate with us for what we deserve, because we've been the ones to make these airlines a success.
It is what you deserve. It is what other workers and other industries deserve. And I love the example that you gave about the pilots, and they were shouting you out. You have been a shining example, Madam President, of what it means to stand up for the people who work with you. Again, not asking for more than what you deserve. Better wages, better work conditions, and better benefits. Don't we all deserve that? And yes, we're all in the working class, baby. If you can't afford to take a 3 months, 6 months to a year off, baby, you in the working class. You work for a living, and we got to stand together. And one other point I wanted to make, Madam President, Airport Workers United sent out a tweet, right? They said, "Dear Congress, when you fly home for August recess, remember airport service workers help make that trip possible." And when you laid out the fact that you have so many other labor folks in and around the industry of the airline industry, so that Delta doesn't know, they can't try to divide and conquer. That reminded me of what they put out. They said, "Don't forget about us. Include the hashtag Good Airports standards in FAA reauthorization. When we have fair wages and healthcare, it makes travel better for everyone." So please, please, please do not forget about all of the workers that make that ecosystem run.
Yes,
because they all do, don't they?
Yes. I mean, it's all about safety and security, and the traveling public should get this one. You buy any product or you go into any store, and if the workers are treated well, you're likely to have a much better experience as a consumer. But at airports, if you don't, all of these jobs used to be directly employed by the airlines, and they have systematically been outsourced over the years to become contract work, and that has undermined the value of the jobs. The people who push the wheelchairs, the people who are getting the food ready and prepping to go on the planes so that we can fly these trips and have water and be able to provide for people while we're up there in the air. The people who are working in the concessions at the airports. None of this would work without all these people who do all these jobs to make flying a possibility. And they are in secure areas. They are a part of the safety network that makes it all work. And we have to recognize that when you see workers who get that airport badge and then it allows them to apply for jobs at several of these different contractors, and you see them sleeping in a gate area because they don't even have time to go home to their families between shifts just to try to make enough to get by and feed their families. This is wrong, and it's putting the onus on the workers, and it's putting the onus on the traveling public to put up with it so that Wall Street can get richer and richer. And we got to correct it. We got to correct it by organizing and standing together and making the demands like you just read off.
Yeah, we do. And we truly are all in this together. The dominoes is falling on each and every one of us. And lastly, Madam President, as we close out this edition of the conversation on TYT, thank you all for joining us today. If you're just tuning in, I am with Sara Nelson, the one and only, the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants. Senator Fetterman, John Fetterman, he introduced legislation, introduces the food stamps bill for workers on the picket line. So glad that he did that. Shouldn't have to come to that, but we talked about policy early on in the interview. Glad that he's stepping up and making it known that people deserve to eat.
You know, this is something that in a mean-spirited way was stripped out of the law. So this is an action that was taken, mostly led by the GOP, to strip these benefits from striking workers. And we gotta set this right, but you gotta love John Fetterman. You know, he comes from labor, he's one of us. He gets this stuff inside and out. And he's right, and he's got an incredible number of co-sponsors because everybody knows that our democracy, our economy, our very lives, the existential threats that we have to solve together, it all matters when workers can stand up and get our fair share and get to the table and be respected with our voices. And I think about the Wabtec workers who are on strike right now in Erie, Pennsylvania. They're on strike for a good contract, but they're also on strike to say, hey, we're the ones who know how to make the vehicles and make the things that we need to transition to a green economy. You gotta put us to work. You gotta make sure that's our work. You gotta make sure that our ingenuity and creativity and our know-how is a part of shaping what's gonna happen next in America. So, you know, what John Fetterman's doing with this bill is really trying to correct what has been an over 80-year assault, essentially since the passing of the Wagner Act in the 1940s, to try to strip, dismantle, undermine any kind of labor rights. And what the bosses need to understand is they can keep going in this direction, but it is going to mean that there is a mass uprising. And so, which is what led to labor law in the first place. So this has been going in the wrong direction, and kudos to the people who are standing up and putting policy out there, putting demands out there to make it clear about what we should expect for each other, for our children, for the next generations. This is what we should expect and what we have to demand. And you're right, no one should go hungry while fighting for their rights.
Nobody should go hungry. And it's very reminiscent of what was stripped out of the New Deal. Those who understand the history, and you think about not just the New Deal, but Social Security and those kinds of things, where you had the anti-worker folks in the Congress decide that they did not want domestic workers or farmers to be counted in that, because they knew that most of those workers in that field at the time were African American. So policies do matter. Who's pushing the policies, who's really standing up and not just simply giving lip service, but willing to put something on the line. So big ups to Senator Fetterman and others who are willing to stand in the ready. We need more of us. You heard our president say to us, and I mean our president, Sara Nelson, say to us that things have changed in the American psyche about labor unions. That is us, and we cannot backtrack from that. We must push policymakers to do the right thing. They don't just do it on their own for the most part. It comes from the grassroots, baby, not from the grass tops. And in the immortal words of Chairman Fred Hampton, all power to the people. President Sara Nelson, it was so wonderful to have you here on The Conversation on TYT, and we cannot wait to have you back with us again.
Thank you, sister. Be with you anywhere, anytime.
Anytime, anywhere. But that is our time today on The Conversation. Make sure that you get involved and you get engaged. President Sara Nelson gave you all kind of whole list. You can follow her on Twitter. You can find her on Facebook, Instagram. She gave you a whole list of actions that are taking place all over this country for her labor union and others. Get involved, get engaged, be a part of the change that you want to see in the world. This has been The Conversation. I'm Nina Turner. You know what I want you to do about this time. I want you to keep the faith always, always, always. But more important, I want you to keep the fight. Until next time.